So I'm now welcoming three very fabulous guys, founder of soon-to-be already done a unicorn in fintech industry. So I will have the pleasure to get on stage Rob Frohwein, CEO and founder of Kabbage from US, Jill Andrews, founder and chairman of Zopa in UK, and Käärmann, CEO and co-founder of TransferWise. Please applause. Three of you there, and I'm Lisa. You should have mine. You have? Okay. So first, thank you for coming. I know the trip is... you don't have mic? It's okay? I know the trip is long, and some of you took a canoe, perhaps, to come with a float or something. But thank you very much. You have to know something. We do a great event, but I'm very bad at organizing my panel. So these guys don't have a clue on the question I will ask them. So, and they are still nice. They didn't complain at all. So first, I will ask you, all of you, take 2 minutes to present who you are, because even if you are very famous, you never know. Some people need perhaps a bit more to know who you are and what is your company. So perhaps, Rob, and we do the turn.
Well, thanks for having me here today. Very happy to be here. Rob Frohwein, co-founder and CEO of Kabbage. Kabbage provides working capital to small businesses throughout the US under our own brand. We also partner with banks globally to help them have the same online small business lending experience we have in the US. So we're partnered with banks like Santander, ING, Scotiabank, launched in Spain, UK, Canada, Mexico, Italy, and France, and other territories coming online this year. We've put out about $4.2 billion so far to 140,000 small businesses in the US, in addition to the international business. And happy to be here.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Giles Andrews. I'm the chairman and was one of the founders of Zopa. Zopa was the world's first peer-to-peer lending business when we launched it in 2005. We lend exclusively to UK consumers. Our money comes from a mixture of private individuals and institutions. We will lend our £3 billion this week. I'm not sure whether it'll be Wednesday or Thursday. We lent about £1 billion last year. Been profitable for 18 months, 300 odd people in London.
And Käärmann from TransferWise. All we do is we move currencies around the world. I started 2011 with me and my co-founder figuring out a way how to bypass the bank's exchange rate. Since then, we launched TransferWise, which effectively allows people to move money at the mid-market exchange rates, and we charge a transparent fee, which is, other than the central banks, the only time you're able to do this. So we moved now we started with pound and euro just to solve the problem here, and now we're in 42 countries, moving about 1.5 billion euros every month. And the number that we're most proud of is that we save our users about 2 million euros a day in bank fees.
So as you can all see, and you can check on internet during the time we discuss, these are not small kids in fintech. So I wanted to have you there because I was last year at Lendit, and I saw our friend Renaud Laplanche, former CEO of Lending Club, doing a presentation, a nice keynote on bundling, unbundling, rebundling of finance. And he was speaking of some of you and others guys, like Isitel, Jacob is there tomorrow, and so on, saying something quite simple. All of you began with a very vertical niche, very simple spot, sweet spot. And by the way, all the banks were always saying it's easy for them. They choose the easy one, they do it very well, and they let us the problem. And it appears that the last few years, we see many of you asking for bank license, doing new products, going away from your original. So I wanted to know more on that directly to the people in charge. So that's mainly my only question of the panel, and I have a few other ones, of course, but why? Why do you go as you have something working, you make money, you are profitable, and it's working quite fine, and you have still plenty of market to address? Why trying suddenly to rebundle everything and perhaps becoming just a classical bank for corporates or for classical consumers? So perhaps you answer first, Rob.
All right, well, we're going to have to move it around a little bit so I can hear their answers before I answer mine. You know, I think it's about figuring out what the customer needs. You know, Kabbage has now, our brand's recognized by about 1/3 of all small businesses in the US. We've got a lot of customers. They borrow from us 20 times over 3 to 4 years. I'd say we're heavy transactional, and we want to continue to create value for the end customer, and so we think about other ways that we can add value. While we've addressed a specific pain point, working capital, there are other times that they need capital that, for us, that we're not the best source just because we're not there at the time. And so we've launched a plastic card. We're allowing our customers to get invoice advances, allowing them to use us for bill pay, doing things at checkout. Now, to utilize Kabbage at all those points, they should think of Kabbage, when they have a need for capital. And so that's what we're trying to do. And we're also thinking about how we might be able to expand beyond just lending going forward. So that's the strategy, but it's really to focus on how we can create more value for the customer at the end of the day, and how we can do that logically for them.
But is it create more value for the customer, or is it because you are at a tipping point where you don't have more value with your original business and you want to do other business?
I think a lot of people try to expand markets or do things because they've tapped out a current market. But the small business lending market, the need for capital in the U.S. is so, and frankly everywhere, because we operate obviously in other territories, is so significant that we're not anywhere sort of near the top. But now it's about showing them that we can provide broader value. And many of the things that we're doing are just other uses of capital.
Quite the same question for the B2C market with both of you. So perhaps Christo?
Yeah, so for us, it's we're still revolving around the same problem. We're solving the same problem. It's just for different people. We're rolling out debit cards like Rob, but it's not really to replace banks at all. The main use case for that debit card is if you have multiple currencies in your TransferWise borderless account, then you can use them wherever you are without the fees that come with foreign currency use with normal banks. So it's still solving the foreign currency problem, and one is adding different products, and the other is moving to different segments. So a few years ago, we found out that there's a bank in Hungary who started recommending TransferWise to their customers, and that kind of gave us the clue that actually it's not just consumers who need the service, who need to move dollars to euros, euros to pounds, and so on, but it's also banks and large businesses and others who operate in different verticals. But
even by staying on just transfer, you could keep the same word transfer and do current account, because it's helping to have multi-currency current account, and I can't afford the HSBC one, for example, and I want yours. So you could go further and further and still saying, I'm doing only transfer. But at the end of the day, you will have like large offer. Or you want really to stick to just moving money and have a credit card, or you have already bigger plan?
We definitely see that the problem that we're solving is moving money between currencies. And we're adding things around it that make it easier for users and different segments to use. So the primary metric being this $2 million a day that we're saving our users. What are the products that will drive this up? Like what will give our users more savings, or future users more savings on currency transfers?
Yeah, but just science fiction. One day you will say, oh, I see all this money going from point A to point B. Perhaps I could help them to do savings. And why not doing them a saving product? And why not doing trading in currencies? Tomorrow we have Saxo Bank CEO here. Do you have limits in your plan like that? Or?
I think we're all limited here by, so if I may still answer this, we're all limited by the imaginations and others who are doing the same thing. So there's no reason for us to do lending, because there's these two guys doing lending much better than we could figure out how to do. And savings product, I don't know how to do a better savings product than who's out there, Wealthfront.
Good transition to you, Jill.
I think when you start a business, it's helpful to be really focused on solving a specific customer need. And the more focused that customer need, the easier it is to gain any sort of traction and have any sort of success. So in our case, we thought that we could disrupt the world of lending by being better at data analytics and be better at predicting and pricing risk. So we built up an organizational capability to do that. And I think over a dozen years or so, we've built a world-class risk management function. And I think as you solve a problem in a particular niche, if you're lucky enough to get any sort of scale, you're probably also building organizational muscle and capability that you can start thinking about how to apply that muscle into other allied or aligned sectors. So so we asked ourselves, as we build a personal lending business, we've got if we lent £1 billion last year, we've got about a 3% market share of the UK market. That's an interesting number, but it's a number that can get a lot bigger. So to Laurent's point, we could carry on growing that business alone and build an interesting and large business. But we can also use the capability we've built in terms of managing risk, in terms of user experience. We delight the customers we lend money to. So what else could we do in that space? And we thought, well, we could offer other lending products. There are many other lending products that are bigger than personal loans, credit cards and mortgages, multiple factor bigger than the sector we're in. So as we start thinking about that, we think, well, how do we service those customers using the capability we have? And that led to our plan to launch a bank using different sources of capital to our matched capital. So on our personal loan business, we match the supply and the maturity of money from our investors to our borrowers. If you're selling someone a credit card, you can't match that maturity. If I'm selling a revolving line of credit, as Rob does, he couldn't use a peer-to-peer funding mechanism. He has to use his own balance sheet. So we start thinking about using our own balance sheet, and then that led us to the decision to launch a bank. But our bank will be incredibly focused. It will stick to what we're good at, which is consumer lending. We won't do business lending. And we won't offer a current account because we don't know how to Christo's point, we don't know how to offer a better current account than Monzo or Tandem. But we do think we know how to offer a better credit card than HSBC or Barclays. No apologies if you're in the room. So using the capability we've built over a dozen years in very sort of tangentially related sectors.
So you just explain what you won't do, but give us a bit more insight about what you will do with your bank. I mean, when will it be launched?
We hope to launch a bank later this year. So we've been in conversation with the regulators now for about 15 months, and it's generally reckoned to be a 2-year process.
I thought it was much quicker in UK.
Well, that's pretty quick. Prior to, who was the first? Prior to Atom or guys like that, no one had launched a new bank in the UK for about 100 years. So I think 2 years is pretty rapid.
Okay, and so you were just mentioning that no current account, and mainly just lending in classical
we'll take
lending?
deposits. So the benefit of a banking license is it gives you access or the ability to take deposits. Since we have an investment product with a brilliant user experience, we do think we can offer a brilliant deposit product. And the channels we use to recruit borrowers actually in many cases are the same channels where savvy people looking for the best rates on either their loans or their deposits typically go shopping. So we think we understand how to recruit those customers. We think we understand the experience we give them. And those funds will enable us to make different lending products available. So initially credit cards, auto finance, and ultimately mortgages, which typically can't really be funded without a healthy amount of deposits, because deposits are historically probably the lowest cost funding for banks.
My understanding, sorry to stay on you 1 minute more, but my understanding is you are only in UK today.
Yeah.
So why did you do this strategic choice when you want to develop your company to say, okay, let's do new business instead of just like many of your competitors do, let's go abroad and develop the same in France, you can come, and Germany and whatever.
So when we were thinking, having built up this capability in our peer-to-peer business, there was a very natural point. How do we expand the business? Do we go abroad, or do we stay in the UK and do more in the UK? We decided we probably shouldn't do both. I think focus remains important in fast-growing companies. And peer-to-peer lending as an industry doesn't transfer across borders well. There isn't any common regulation. So just because I've got a license even pre-Brexit, just because I've got a license to do it in London doesn't mean I can do it in Paris. So there's no common regulatory standard. So actually, we've seen a little bit of cross-border peer-to-peer on the SME, on the business lending side, because that's not regulated in the same way, but on the consumer lending side, there's been no really successful cross-border work. So we decided not to do that. And the UK is a really interesting and big market, and we think we can build a business at least 10 times bigger in the next 5 years staying in the UK. There is a longer-term benefit of operating a bank, which is that banking is a transferable activity across territories. So ignoring Brexit for a moment, one can more easily imagine a Zopa bank operating cross-border than a Zopa peer-to-peer business.
I was just wondering at what time the Brexit word will come, so it's 9:21. So we'll take 5 minutes.
Bingo.
We'll take 5 minutes to discuss that at the end. I'm sure even American have an opinion on that. To come back on Europe, same question. You are in different countries, you mentioned. Can you tell us a bit more about your international development?
Sure, no, absolutely. So we operate directly in the U.S. under the Kabbage brand. We do have a partnership with the bank there, but that's for purpose of originating the account. We run it under the Kabbage brand, and we take full balance sheet risk in the U.S. We had actually entered the U.K. market directly as Kabbage a few years back, and then realized we were I think we did that in February 2012 when we had been maybe really operational for a year. It was too soon, to be frank. We realized over the following couple of years it made more sense to partner with larger banks that were looking to provide the same experience. And so we actually transitioned that UK business over to Santander, and now we really power their online small business lending function here not here in the UK. In the UK, I was in the UK a couple of days ago, so here at that point made sense. We also work with ING. We're working with them in Spain, Italy, and France, and Scotiabank. In Mexico and Canada. In each of those relationships, they're really licensing technology from us, but they're also including the Kabbage brand within the user experience. It was important to us to make sure that we stayed connected to the customer in some way, and also that the bank really treated us like a partner, not like a vendor in the process. And then finally, we also have the opportunity to participate in the book. To the extent that our partners either allow us to participate vertically, which means that we take a vertical slice of the portfolio, or horizontally, which means that they might have a very small credit box, and we can extend credit to the customers that they might ordinarily reject. And then there's obviously a tier of customers that don't work for either us or a bank partner. So that's sort of the nature of those relationships, and we've, like I said, launched in 6 countries outside the US right now. And we have 2 more coming online this year.
So outside of US is indirect sales. You work mainly with partners.
Yeah, well, it's indirect, but it's really their balance sheet. It's their brand. It's their customer. So outside the US, it's really us as a service provider, and it's really a SaaS-based offering from Kabbage. So we're this odd mix of balance sheet lender and also licensor of technology.
So, and it's clearly a strategy. You don't want to do the same kind of business that you do in US, in Europe, where you are direct to consumers?
Are we planning on launching direct? No, well, not right now, unless there was some acquisition opportunity with a company that was operating in Europe or operating in South America or Asia that we thought made sense for us to partner with and sort of take over that direct business.
And just a question on that. Is it because it's more difficult to launch in our Europe country compared to US for regulation issues and things like that, or other reason?
I think there are a couple of reasons. One is they really understand the regulatory markup. Just what was mentioned about the fact that the regulations, and there is a fly going.
Yeah, there is a fly on stage, which is very boring.
You're not supposed to have this kind of interaction with flies.
Yeah. They look at you. I'm not a fly,
they're obviously attracted to me. That typically I'm like fly paper. But they basically they understand the regulatory environment. They understand the local small business market. We really understand online small business lending. So we're bringing a business solution to them is the idea here. But we can really take advantage of all that we do well, and they can take advantage of all that they do well.
And just a question to come back to our panel, which is Unbundling, Rebundling. When the banks, which are your partner, you will manage to get it if you concentrate.
It's a green fly, by the way. If you see it, kill it.
It will be a game in 2 minutes. It will be horrible to manage. So when the banks, your partners, see that you are trying to do other line of business, do you have remarks? Could sometimes they ask you, okay, don't do that in my market, or could they be afraid of you trying to do more things? More afraid than this fly?
No, there's not really been that kind of conflict. We do have some, we believe that we should only have a small number. This is really a partnership, so it's really important for us that they're successful over time. So it's not about us landing 10 relationships in a particular market. It's really about concentrating 1 or 2 relationships per market. And so that's what we're focused on. And they're not really, we're really providing a small business lending. Although I will say, as we sort of expand and per the last question, we do want to make sure we unify the experience between what we do in the US and what our partners offer in other territories, because ultimately we're doing it because we think that's the best outcome for the customer. So if it's the best outcome for the customer, not only should we do it in the US, they should do it in the markets where they operate.
So when we speak of unbundling, rebundling, we speak of growth. So growth, we just saw with you, Rob, that you are doing new services, you are doing new countries, and also service to finance industry, which is quite a key focus today in many fintechs. They serve with you. My understanding, Christo, is you are more like the Google of your world. You want to be alone. You don't provide your service to banks, for example, do you? Right now?
So first of all, in terms of the approach that we took on going global was very different from both of them. So first of all, we went global immediately because there's just so much demand. Like, it's not just pounds and euros in the world; it's all these other currencies. And now we're able to deliver to 92% of the world's bank accounts, which means that we're locally integrated in 67 countries. And there's quite a lot of complexity in doing that. And now coming back to your question. This is impossible for many banks. So if you look at the banks other than maybe Citi, HSBC, and BNP, maybe a couple of others, banks are a very local business. So if you look at the majority of the world's banks, it's a very local business. You're in your country, maybe even in your county, and you know your customers really well. Whereas we built something that has to work pretty much the same way anywhere in the world, and therefore we kind of ended up in this business that banks really don't want to do themselves. It's very, very expensive to do it well. So what happens is they find, okay, we could do these international SWIFT wires, but our customers are going to hate us for it. The experience is so bad. So why don't we go the way that, say, number 26 did? With a similar partnership that Rob was describing, where the number 26 customers can use TransferWise from within their app. So this is, I think, the most beautiful integration of financial services, where you have this one banking app, and from within that app, without even leaving that app, you can use Kabbage, you can use TransferWise, you can store your money, your savings in Zopa, and I think that's where we see the, first of all, the younger banks, but now the more established ones.
Do you manage to have this kind of discussion with established one? Because, of course, the neobanks, they all want to copy that. Valentin is there in 15 minutes, by the way, on that seat. He paid him to say that. No, but do you already manage to have this kind of discussion with real established bankers?
Oh, yeah. We have, actually. It's quite interesting. I was thinking about this the other day. We have a lot of banks talking to us about this. And surprisingly, I kind of expected these are going to be the small ones. No, they're actually the largest ones. The largest ones are feeling the pain the most, because they have to deal with this entire complexity of sending. How do account numbers work in South Korea?
So you mean they don't care, because when you use a transfer from a bank, we do sometimes from far away, we pay that crazily expensive compared to your service. But what you say is, in fact, it's expensive, but it's costly for them. So.
Oh yeah. So we did a little stat with the help of actually McKinsey's. They did this. They did the survey, and they figured out how much it costs banks to operate international transfers. And we were surprised to find that the cost base for banks is about 3 times as high as what we charge from our users. Just the cost is 3 times higher than our fees. So even without telling us, they could use our service and save about...
Not to mention that sometimes to route a wire transfer from one country to another, it's an Excel sheet to look the routes and to know. So sometimes new technology. So you say that soon we could see big banks saying you can transfer with TransferWise.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it's not only for N26.
No, but they're getting the benefit of being there first, and you know, if you talk to their users, they very much enjoy that. I think you should ask Valentin, but
it will be there. So the next question is more: same as for Rob. When these banks see your success and see how you are, sorry for this guest of flies, when these banks see your success, aren't they afraid to partner with you because you have a close relationship with your customer, you have a brand with a very high, let's say, sympathy capital, which is not always the case for every actor. Do you have this kind of discussion? I mean, how try perhaps to protect their customer from you or to keep the relation?
So this is a very good question, and I think this is changing. I really see this is changing. Like 2 years ago, banks were very kind of cautious that anything that was fintech and that wasn't titled a bank, something that is dangerous in some way to them, to their business. I think it's getting more interesting for them, and there's definitely a lot more willingness to partner and realization that banks have to change as well. So let me give you an example. Banks all over the world have been trying to hide their margins in the exchange rate. It was last month that Barclays in the UK put a tooltip on their site which says that your transfer from pound to euro, we give you this exchange rate, but by the way, this exchange rate includes 2.75% of margin for us. So that's the first time this has actually happened, and this is awesome how banks see that it's going to change, so they will have to change as well.
Transparency.
Yeah, that was a big win.
Yeah, you just mentioned something very interesting about cooperation, because we don't know each other well, but we launched this forum 2 years ago on the cooperation world, because at this time in 2015, everybody was speaking about banks fighting with fintech, and I personally not believe in that. I was in the first fintech wave in the 90s, and I saw all my friends finishing by selling to banks. Mine is just bankrupt, but the other ones sell to banks, and very few are still working alone. So I think cooperation and competition was a good one. You are everywhere in the world, not only France or UK. Do you see this thing a bit everywhere? This cooperation move?
It's happening at a different pace. I do feel that UK and Europe are in some ways a step ahead. I think the wave, and Rob should correct me, got a little bit later to the US, and I think in Asia it's just getting going. Especially, Japan, for example, takes things quite slowly, but then when they do it well.
So just to come back to the unbundling, rebundling, with what you say, so you work more and more with the banks. Again, the same question that for the others. In your discussion, in your ongoing discussion, is it a point that perhaps they tell you, okay, we work with you, but don't go in that market, don't do, for example, multi-currency account tomorrow because this is our field, or things like that, or it's not at all the point right now?
For us, it's not a concern.
It's not a concern right now. Sorry, but I can't keep more than 12 minutes without speaking about Brexit. So you have two UK guys here. We speak of international, we speak of development, we speak of working with banks. What has changed in the last 12 months for you in your discussion? I mean, you try to work with banks, you try to work with big actors all over Europe and the world. Did that change anything, or in fact it's just for Fox News and LCI or whatever?
Giles, what's your take?
We live in interesting times, and I think it's very dangerous to predict how it's going to pan out. There was some interesting news we were discussing just on our way into the auditorium this morning. I think it hasn't changed the view, to answer the question about bank cooperation. I don't think that's changed at all. I think one of the reasons banks increasingly cooperate with businesses like the three of ours is because we're reaching a scale where we become interesting. They're very cautious beasts, so they don't want to work with every startup that appears. But as you begin to establish that you have capabilities, they become interested in working with you. We set out with a sort of strapline, not very different to TransferWise, is that we were better than banks. So it's kind of interesting that we've evolved into working in partnership with the banks. We have banks lending on our platform, providing capital to us. They do so in a blind manner. They can't have any influence on the loan assets that they buy, so they delegate entire credit management to us, which is difficult for a bank risk committee to say, we're going to let a startup manage credit and we have no say in how they do it. We're also beginning to sell our product in small banks, so building societies, which are small mutually owned banks in the UK, are beginning to sell our product. And we're in discussions with banks as to whether or not we should actually provide some kind of service, not dissimilar to Rob's, in terms of lending as a service to banks. So cooperation increases over time. I don't think it's Brexit related.
was quite liked how no one wants to talk about Brexit.
Well, we have Trump in the U.S., so we don't talk much about Brexit.
Rob, I have a question for you after on Brexit, but easier one. No.
But so on Brexit for us, we don't. So we operate in 40. So we offer our services in 42 countries where we're licensed in some way to do that. So adding a 43rd country isn't really a big deal. It just happens where we got started. It's the kind of that same country that we need to add. It's really not such a big deal. It's you know, if I had the votes, I wouldn't have voted for this. But yeah, it's not, from a business perspective, it's not a big deal.
We had a chat about that when we were at the UK embassy in September with you, Christo, and my understanding of the situation is that okay, that happens. We'll deal with it. You are everywhere, as you mentioned, and you can move people from one place to another. You can have offices everywhere. That's not really, that's political, but you can manage it on the business side, is my understanding.
Correct. We have already 2 offices in the remaining European Union. We have 9 offices around the world. We have 900 people. So it's mostly the question of, you know, what's the weight of one country or one office versus others, and a lot of this Brexit discussions come down to us. Through hiring. So is London still going to be the place where the Parisians? So we have a lot of people from Paris.
Yeah, I think
working
the
in our
second or
office in
third
London.
city of France is London. Yeah.
Exactly. So are they still looking to spend part of their life in London, working in London? If so, then there's no impact. If Brexit changes that, then of course there's a talent impact.
So the most tangible thing we've done is open a development office in Barcelona, and we call that our Brexit hedge. It's a talent hedge. It's not going to save us any money. I mean, all in, including the cost of travelling and an extra office infrastructure. I don't think we save any money on a development hour, but it's a very international city, which people will want to come live in for a long period of time. So that was our move post-Brexit.
It's a bit more sunny also than London, so you don't.
It's a nice place.
You don't lose everything. Just a question for you. I know Brexit is quite far from US, but when we see that a small flood in Paris is like Paris underwater in US, does Brexit put on hold some discussion from big companies like you to say, oh, let's expand to Europe, or let's wait they finish their discussion?
So it really is driven by our bank partners. So we're very active, speaking with partners all around the world. We have another Latin American country that's going to come online, and then our first Asian launch is going to be later this year. So we're in conversations with another UK bank. So we definitely are not we're not shying away because of what's coming up with Brexit. We're really taking the lead from our partners and making sure that we have arrangements in place to make sure we're protected as we go through that process, obviously, because that risk should rest with our partner, not with us.
We have an opportunity today to discuss of this UK subject, and just one last point on my friend from UK. If you look in the book, you will see that even if we're at Paris today, the majority of fintech, the biggest number, come from UK in that book, and also, of course, on stage. But if you look further, you will see that many of the founders are very diverse names, because today in Europe, and even still with Brexit, most of the time when you continue to choose to build your first headquarters, you choose London. So you will see many Polish company, Romanian company, Estonian company, whatever, having their headquarters in London. That's why you see UK as, I think, 33, 34 on the 140 I present you in the book. What we will see is in 3 years, is it still the same? We'll see. So just to come back on more your business, unbundling, rebundling. When I discussed with Tavet, your co-founder, it was, I think, 6 months ago in Madrid, he told me that you don't have so many other brands like TransferWise, and I think we could also mention Zopa and Kabbage, which are almost in finance industry known by everybody, global and known by everybody. And he thinks that he told me for him it was very hard to make that move, and that not all fintech could do that thing, rebundling and bundling. I mean, it will be only for very few, like at the Google time, in the end of 90s, you had plenty of robot search, at the end you have Google. Do you think it's, all of you, we could see other brands coming like that, like tens doing what you are doing, rebundling, unbundling, more services, or really it will stay for a few, like you and some others, but not big, massive scale?
So I personally think that this unbundling is just getting started. So I think we'll see more unbundling happen. But at the same time, again, maybe it's too close to home. I definitely see that there's efficiency to gain from operating globally. So the same way that you have one Facebook for almost everyone apart from China, and then you have one Google for everyone. You don't need a separate French Google and Japanese Google. So I think that a lot of that efficiency will be carried over to the finance sector, where I don't know, maybe in the future the current account doesn't need to be very different because we all deal with money exactly the same way. And the only global ones that are truly global, I think, are Visa and MasterCard. And PayPal has done a great job from the kind of the old guard of financial services. Only very few banks have gotten that kind of global view of the world, and technically, they're just a composition of branches, local branches. So I think there's definitely an opportunity from the technology perspective to be global.
Same ending question for both of you.
I think financial services are a little bit different to many industries simply because of the level of regulation and the lack of harmonization of regulation between different jurisdictions. So I think, therefore, that speaks against the rise of truly global companies, except in the utility space in financial services, which I would describe Visa and MasterCard. And I'm sure other utilities will evolve where regulations are more harmonized and you'll see some global players. But in the world of consumer or SME touch points with consumers and small businesses, I think it's unlikely you'll see truly global players in my working lifetime anyway.
So from my perspective, having a direct relationship with the customers all over the world is very hard to do. I think that the approach we took puts us in a position to have a global impact, but really have a very local direction as it relates to our brand and specifically having direct relationships with companies. I do think, though, sort of the next phase of fintech going forward, one of the interesting stories will be not just about unbundling, but what companies are in a position to have a deeper relationship with their customers. Not be necessarily monoline companies, but be companies that are able to offer at least some breadth of product to customers that they've really invested a huge amount of money to acquire, and the underlying infrastructure of the company is set up to serve customers in potentially a broader way. And customers who can take advantage of that while maintaining sort of a digital focus on digital so that you can, keep OpEx, where it needs to be relative to the way banks operate. I think you put yourself in great position, and it's also something that can help you weather a storm, whether it's through a cycle or whether it's through any other kinds of backlashes that happen, or if you have a deeper, broader relationship with a customer.
Thank you very much. We are late already of 2 minutes, so I have to thank you. Please applause my friend.